Hello, welcome everybody. Let me see if I can stand up and show us the ocean. We're going to be reading Sir Gibbie again. We're going back in the book and we're in nature. And I brought my mic so I can... all those clouds, that's the ocean. That's the marine layer over the ocean. So here we are in this awesome nature. And we have Leia with us today. She's here again. And anyway, my hair's a little wild. All right, let's go. Let's get our book out. George MacDonald was a spiritual mentor of C.S. Lewis. Here's the sun. And so C.S. Lewis learned so much about his spiritual path, this true spiritual path, through the writings of George MacDonald, because the things we're learning are just, they're so profound and so deep and so much more than words can express. And so if someone can express them imaginatively and poetically, like the Narnia books, or like George MacDonald has in all the books that we've been reading, then it's important. Our soul longs for authenticity and for real teachings, not just for dogma and for everything to be in a tiny box. It's so much more, even the things that look like they're in a tiny box. God is teaching us, if you want to call it God, the absolute infinite beingness that is the uncreated, self-existent one. God is teaching us how to walk on this earth plane and how to live, and because he's developing something so much deeper in each of us and around us to other people. So when we're not in love, when we're not acting in love, then it's like I don't know, we're not, it says no man anything but love. Anyway, I don't want to go into it more. There's these little tiny flowers on the ground right here. I'll see if that zooms in on one. Hopefully that didn't turn my... Here we go, yo. Let's start. Here we are in Sir Gibbie, and just trust that you're here for a reason. If you'd like to, I encourage you to do that. I pray, God, that you speak to every single person here in whatever way you want to speak to their soul and heal their soul and heal old traumas, or just be present with them in this story, through this man, George MacDonald. I pray that you help him write it right now, because you are above all time. Write it for each of the people that are here that you want to minister to, that you want to care for and heal. Jesus said he came to heal the brokenhearted. God, I just pray anywhere our hearts are broken because of the fallenness of this world, that you will heal us, and that we're open to receiving that from you in this strange way of a story. All right, so we're in the middle of this chapter. Let me see what chapter it is. It's about a boy, Sir Gibbie. You can go back and listen to other parts if you'd want, or most of the time I have the description, and I have the PDF because it's from the 1800s. It's chapter 22, Refuge. All right, here. And they're going to speak sometimes in Scottish Broke language. I don't always know how to translate that, but I'm not here as a professional. I'm just here as a person. I was going to read this story to myself, and then I always want to just share this love with other people. And so we get what we get. Anyway, all right. So Gibbie was whipped by these people for helping out these other people. He was secretly helping them out, and they caught him, and they took him to the laird of the land, and he had his game master whip him as if he was like stealing animals, or people would poach and stuff back then. But he wasn't doing anything but helping. And so they totally misread him. And that can happen in our lives, just FYI. Jesus said, "Blessed are you if you're persecuted for my name's sake." For anything done in true love, that's not recognized as true love. I forget what you get. It's in Matthew 5. I was reading it this morning. And it's at the end of one of the Gospels too. Anyway. So he ran up to Janet's house up in the mountains. And Janet rescued, just ministered to him, cared for him, loved him, gave him some porridge with her family. Her family comes home on the weekend. In the judgment of all her guests, the porridge was as such as none could make but mother, the milk such as none but mother's cow could yield, the cakes such as she only could bake. Gibbie sat in the bed like a king on his throne, gazing on his kingdom, for he that loves has as no one else has. It is the divine possession. Picture the delight of the child in his passion for his kind, looking out upon this company of true hearts, honest faces, human forms, all strong and healthy, loving each other and generous to the taking in of the world's outcast. Gibbie could not, at that period of his history, have invented a heaven more to his mind. And as often as one of them turned eyes toward the bed, his face shone up with love and merry gratitude, like a better sun. S-U-N. Ah, look at that. I just released yesterday of teaching on a song called Island in the Sun, about like entering into this place of contemplation with God and just this love in life, not just with God. It's just life is a prayer. It says pray without ceasing. And so it's like this, you have this refuge, like Janet's house here, when you learn how to take everything to the Creator and trust in his love and test him, let him show you his love and his generosity. Anyway, it was now almost time for the sons and daughters to go down the hill again and leave the cottage, and the blessed old parents and the harbored child to the night, the mountain silence, and the living God. Wow. The sun had long been down, but far away in the north, the faint thin fringe of his light garment was still visible, moving with the unseen body of his glory softly eastward, dreaming along the horizon, growing fainter and fainter as it went. But at the faintest, then beginning to revive and grow, of the northern lands in summer, it may be said, as of the heavens of heaven of heavens, that there is no night there, and by the moon also would attend the steps of the returning children of labor. New lads and lassies, afore we have worship one ilk aina ye, said the mother. And I don't know what she's saying. Something about her sons and daughters, no lads and lasses. Before we have worship, don't you think of... anyway, I put heather to make a bed for the wee man, and don't you think of the hide oars. He'll sleep there, bonny. Don't worry about him. I think she's saying that. He's going to sleep all bonny, all nice and bonny in a heather bed that they're going to make him. And no ill will come of him near me. Will come near him. No, anyway, that's Psalm 91. No harm shall come near him. She was obeyed instantly. The heather was pulled, so she asked them to get some heather for a bed for him, and set together upright as it grew, only much closer, so that the tops made a dense surface, and the many stalks, each weak, a strong upbearing whole. They boxed them in below with a board or two for the purpose, and bound them together above with a blanket over the top, and a white sheet over that, a linen sheet it was, and large enough to be doubled and receive Gibbie between its folds. Then another blanket was added, and the bed, a perfect one, was ready. The eldest of the daughters took Gibbie in her arms, and tenderly, careful over his hurts, lifted him from the old folks' bed and placed him in his own, one more luxurious, for heather makes a still better stratum for repose than oat chaff, and Gibbie sank into it with a sigh that was but a smile grown vocal. Wow. Because he can't speak. Gibbie can't speak. Then Donald, as the youngest, got down the big Bible, and having laid it before his father, lighted the rush pithwick projecting from the beak of the little iron lamp that hung against the wall. Its shape descended from Roman times. The old man put on his spectacles, took the book, and found the passage that fell in continuous process to that evening. Wow. So I guess they only come up for the day on Saturday and take care of their parents and say hello and then go back to their own beds where they're working down below. Now he was not a very good reader, and what with blindness and spectacles and poor light, this is like, anyway, would sometimes lose his place, but it never troubled him, for he always knew the sense of what was coming, and being no idolater of the letter, used the word that first suggested itself, and so recovered his place without pausing. It reminded his sons and daughters of the time when he used to tell them Bible stories as they crowded about his knees, and sounding therefore merrily, like the substitution of a more familiar word to assist their comprehension, woke no surprise, and even now the word supplied, being in the vernacular, was rather to the benefit than the disadvantage of his hearers. The word of Christ is spirit and life, and where the heart is aglow, the tongue will follow that spirit and life fearlessly, and will not err. Thank you, God. I'm going to read that sentence again. The word of Christ is spirit and life, and where the heart is aglow, the tongue will follow that spirit and life fearlessly, and will not err. On this occasion, he was reading of our Lord's cure of the leper, and having read, put forth his hand, lost his place, and went straight on without it from his memory of the facts, and put forth his hand and gripped him and said, "Ah, will be clean." You will be clean, right? After the reading followed a prayer, very solemn and devout. It was then only when before God and with his wife by his side and his family around him that the old man became articulate. He would scarcely have been so then, and would have floundered greatly in the marshes of his mental chaos, but for the stepping stones of certain theological forms and phrases, which were of endless service to him, in that they helped him to utter what in him was far better, and so realize more to himself his own feelings. Those forms and phrases would have shocked any devout Christian who had not been brought up in the same school, but they did him little harm, for he saw only the good that was in them, and indeed did not understand them, save in so far as they worded that lifting up of the heart after which he was ever striving. So he was a man of very few words. By the time the prayer was over, Gibbie was fast asleep again. What it all meant he had not an idea, and the sound lulled him, a service often so rendered in lien of that intended. A service often so rendered that we fall asleep, but anyway. When he woke next from the aching of his stripes, the cuts on his back, the cottage was dark, the old people were fast asleep. A hairy thing lay by his side, that's their dog, right, which, without the least fear, he examined by palpitation and found to be a dog, whereupon he fell fast asleep again, if possible, happier than ever. And while the cottage was thus quiet, the brothers and sisters were still tramping along the moonlight paths of Daurside. They had all set out together, but at one point after another there had been a parting, and now they were on 6 different roads, each drawing nearer to the labor of the new week. Sunday's the first day of the week. That's what it's called. Come here, Leah. Hold on. Chapter 8, more schooling. All right, hold on. Not chapter 8, sorry. It's chapter 23. I was just looking at, it's Roman numerals, so that's why. Oh, hold on. All right, I hope you're well. I forgot to pour Leia her water. I want her to drink during this hour because we have to walk back. Well, we get to walk back. I'm trying not to dread it because it's getting a little warmer. Here, Leia. There you go. Okay. Do your best not to knock it over. Let's see where I put it. Yeah, she's drinking that all up. Here, I'll show you her if you want to see. Lele. Oh, now she goes away. Dogs will be dogs. There's the ocean. I feel like the marine layer is going to get cleared out. But anyway, Leia. Hold on, she's climbing in the bushes behind me. Just, ah! There you go. There you go. There you go. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so chapter 23, the more schooling. The first opportunity Donald had, he questioned Fergus as to his share in the ill usage of Gibbie. Fergus treated the inquiry as an impertinent interference and mounted his high horse at once. God, help us stay off our high horses. I was praying that the whole way here. You know, we got to call something out that we need to call out, but not get on a high horse, because there's that thing that says, but for the grace of God, there go I. I could do the same thing. One moment, I forgot to get myself some water. All right, thanks for your patience. We're coming back. He got on mounted his high horse at once. What right had his father's herd boy to question him as to his conduct? He put it so to him in nearly just as many words. Thereupon answered Donald, "It's this ye see, Fergus. Ye had been a guide to me, and I'm mere obligated to tell you, nor I can say, but it would be a scoundrelful thing to talk the lens." See, I'm going to put it here so you can see it. If you can translate it for us, put it in the comments. We'd love that. There is a guy that has translated this for us, but it's in a different book, and you have to pay for that, so I can't just take his words. But anyway, but I could listen to it before, but anyway. But basically he's saying, it's not a good thing to get mad when someone's asking questions of you that I can't make out myself. And don't go on despising, and I don't want to despise you, despise you in my heart for cruelty and wrong. What was the creature punished for? Tell me that. Whoa, the dog just knocked over the stand. He calls him the creature, like Gibbie, Sir Gibbie. What was he punished for? Because we'll see. Tell me that. According to your aunt's account, he had not taken nothing and he had done nothing but good. Why didn't he speak up then and defend himself and not be so damned obstinate, returned Fergus. He wouldn't open his mouth to tell his name or where he came from even. I couldn't even get him to utter a single word. As for his punishment, it was by the laird's orders that Angus MacPhelp took the whip to him. I had nothing to do with it. Fergus did not consider the punishment he had himself given him as worth mentioning. You know, he boxed his ears, boxed him in his face twice. And as indeed, except for honesty's sake, it was not beside the other. And so here's what Donald says. Well, I'll be a man some day, and Angus will have to settle with me, said Donald through his clenched teeth. Man, Fergus, the creature's as dumb as a worm. Like he can't speak. He doesn't have the gift of speech, right? I don't believe he ever spoke a word in his life. This cut Fergus to the heart, for he was far from being without generosity or pity. How many things a man who is not awake to side strenuously with the good in him against the evil. See, if you haven't, this is what these books do. You know, it's like if you don't seek after, it said, God will reward those who diligently seek him. God is love. When you seek after truth and love and true righteousness, not sticking it in someone's face and trying to act like you're better than, not like that, but true virtue, which the virtues are amazing, like their courage, prudence, temperance, not yelling at someone when they trigger you, and continuing to love them and wish love for them, but hold people accountable when you want to be a coward and just want to please people. Don't go into your fear mind. All of those things are the virtues. When you strive after this good, then he's saying that your heart won't go astray very much. You'll know what to do in a situation like this. But anyway, he's saying this: how many things a man who is not awake to side strenuously with the good in him against the evil, who is not on his guard lest himself should mislead himself, may do, of which he will one day be bitterly ashamed. All right. So if we're not working towards the good in our everyday life, then we can do things just out of habit and out of our programming from childhood that's cruel to other people, really cruel, and hurts them for years. They have to recover from that. God will help them recover, but still, that will make one day be bitterly ashamed. Now, God can forgive us for each of these things, right? God knows that our weaknesses. A trite remark it may be, but reader, that will make the thing itself no easier to bear, should you ever come to know you have done a thing of the sort. I fear, however, from what I know of Fergus afterwards, that he now, instead of seeking about to make some amends, turned to the strength that should have gone in that direction to the justifying of himself, to himself, in what he had done. So he, instead of using that, because we have, give us this day our daily bread, instead of using that strength to learn how to do the true good, people will learn to try to justify themselves. God help us not. God help us. Hold on, Leia's going behind again. I'll just keep to the book. I trust George MacDonald to teach us through the book. I don't have to lecture or anything. It's not about lecturing. Just sometimes we can pause to understand a little bit more. I'm speaking it to myself to remember as well. But the story will help us remember. You'll see what happens to Fergus later. Leia, come this way, okay? Thank you, girl. Good girl. Good girl. Anyhow, he was far too proud to confess to Donald that he had done wrong, too much offended at being rebuked by one he counted so immeasurably his inferior, to do the right thing, his rebuke set before him, right? So this rebuke set before him but this is his own father owned this farm or was leasing this farm or whatever, and this is the boy that watched over their cows, and this guy Fergus went to school, so he looked down on Donald, not knowing that God looks at the heart and our souls, and it's not about your the money you have in your bank or education or whatever. Anyway, what did the mighty business matter? A little rascal was nothing but a tramp, and if he didn't deserve his punishment this time, he had deserved it 100 times without having it, and would 10,000 times again. So reasoned Fergus, even though Curdy had never taken anything unknowingly. You know what I mean? He was a sweetheart. Sir Gibbie was. All right. Just people make up stuff about people in their minds. So reasoned Fergus, while the feeling grew upon Donald that the creature was of some superior race, came from some other and nobler world. I would remind my reader that Donald was a Celt, with a nature open to every fancy of love or awe, one of the same breed with the foolish Galatians, and like them ready to be bewitched, but bearing a heart that welcomed the light with glad rebound, loved the lovely, nor loved it only, but turned towards it with a desire to become like it. Fergus, too, was a Celt in the main, but was spoiled by the paltry ambition of being distinguished. He was not in love with loveliness, but in love with praise. He saw not a little of what was good and noble, and would fain be such, but mainly that men might regard him for his goodness and nobility. Hence his practical notion of the good was weak, and of the noble paltry. He knew very little of that, right? His one desire in doing anything was to be approved of or admired in the same, approved of in the opinion he held, in the plans he pursued, in the doctrines he taught, admired in the poems in which he went halting after Byron, and in eloquence with which he meant one day to astonish great congregations. There was nothing original as yet discoverable in him, nothing to deliver him from the poor, imitative apiary in which he imagined himself a poet. He did possess one invaluable gift, that of perceiving and admiring, more than a little, certain forms of the beautiful. But it was rendered merely ridiculous by being conjoined with the miserable ambition, poor as that of any mountebank emperor, to be himself admired for that admiration. He mistook also sensibility for faculty, nor perceived that it was at best but a probable sign that he might be able to do something or other with pleasure, perhaps with success. If any one judge it hard that men should be made with ambitions to whose object they can never attain, I answer, ambition is but the evil shadow of aspiration. Wow. And no man ever followed. The truth, which is the path of aspiration. And no man ever followed the truth, which is the one path of aspiration, and in the end complained that he had been made this way or that. Man is made to be that which he is made most capable of desiring. But it goes without saying that he must desire the thing itself and not its shadow. Man is of the truth, and while he follows a lie, no indication his nature yields will hold except the fear, the discontent, the sickness of soul that tell him he is wrong. If he say, I care not for what you call the substance, it is to me the shadow. I want what you call the shadow. The only answer is that to all eternity he can never have it. A shadow can never be had. Ginevra was hardly the same child after the experience of that terrible morning. At no time very much at home with her father. Something had now come between them, to remove which all her struggles to love him as before were unavailing. The father was too stupid, too unsympathetic, to take note of the look of fear that crossed her face if ever he addressed her suddenly, and when she was absorbed in fighting the thoughts that would come, he took her constraint for sullenness, right? Because she didn't want to attack him back and didn't want to hate him, but he had had his gamesman beat this innocent child, this mute, and innocent child. With a cold spot in his heart, where once had dwelt some genuine regard for Donald, Fergus went back to college. Donald went on herding the cattle, cudgeling the horn, I'll just call the cow horn, and reading what books he could lay his hands on. There was no supply through Fergus any more, alas. The year before, ere he took his leave, he had been careful to see Donald provided with at least books for study, but this time he left him to shift for himself. He was small because he was proud, spiteful because he was conceited. He would let Donald know what it was to have lost his favour, but Donald did not suffer much, except in the loss of the friendship itself. He managed to get the loan of a copy of Burns, better meat for a strong spirit than the poetry of Byron or even Scott. An innate cleanliness of soul rendered the occasional coarseness to him harmless, and the mighty torrent of the man's life, broken by occasional pools reflecting the stars, its headlong hatred of hypocrisy and false religion, its generosity and struggling conscientiousness, its failure and its repentances, roused much in the heart of Donald. Happily, the copy he had borrowed had in it a tolerable biography, and that, read along with the man's work, enabled him, young as he was, to see something of where and how he had failed, and to shadow out to himself, not altogether vaguely, the perils to which the greatest must be exposed who cannot rule his own spirit, but like a mere child, reels from one mood into another at the will of what? Wow. Doesn't it make you want to just set this down and go look up Burns' poetry? I've not read it, I don't think. I don't even think I've read Byron much. But we get George MacDonald, and he's read him. From reading Burns, Donald learned also not a little of the capabilities of his own language, for Celt as he was by birth, and country and mental character, he could not speak the Gaelic, that language soft as the speech of streams, from rugged mountains, and wild as that of the wind in the tops of fir trees. The language at once of bards and fighting men had so far ebbed from the region, lingering only here and there in the hollow pools of old memories, that Donald had never learned it, and the lowland Scotch, an ancient branch of English, dry and gnarled, but still flourishing in its old age, had become instead his mother tongue. And the man who loves the antique speech, or even the mere patois of his childhood, and knows how to use it, possesses therein a certain kind of power over the hearts of men, which the most refined and perfect of languages cannot give, inasmuch as it has travelled farther from the original sources of laughter and tears. But the old Scottish itself is, alas, rapidly vanishing before a poor, shabby imitation of modern English, itself a weaker language in sound, however enriched in words. Since the days of Shakespeare, when it was far more like Scotch in its utterance than it is now. Wow. My mother tongue, how sweet thy tone, how near to good allied. Were even my heart of steel or stone, thou wouldst drive out the pride. So see Klaus Groth in and concerning his own Platts Dutch, so nearly akin to the English. To a poet, especially, as it is an inestimable advantage to be able to employ such a language for his purposes. Not only was it the speech of his childhood, when he saw everything with fresh, true eyes, but it is itself a child's speech, and the child way of saying must always lie near the child way of seeing, which is the poetic way. Therefore, as the poetic faculty was now slowly asserting itself in Donald, it was of vast importance that he should know what the genius of Scotland had been able to do with his homely mother tongue, for through that tongue alone could what poetry he had in him have thoroughly fair play, and in turn do its best towards his development, which is the first and greatest use of poetry. It is a ruinous misjudgment, too contemptible to be asserted, but not too contemptible to be acted upon, that the end of poetry is publication. It's a ruinous misjudgment. Like the book that I just wrote, 12 Ways to Heal from trauma. It's not the publication that it is the goal. That's good to remember. He says, it is a ruinous misjudgment too contemptible to be asserted, but not too contemptible to be acted upon, that the end of poetry is publication. Its true end is to help first the man who makes it along the path to the truth. Help for other people may or may not be in it. That, if it become a question at all, must be an after one. Right? So I guess George MacDonald is writing this because God is working this out in his own soul. And then he chooses to share it with us. Thank God he did. Hold on. Leia spilled her water. I'm going to give her a little bit more. I'll give you some, Leia. But I put it up there so you wouldn't spill it. Oh well. I don't want to be critical towards the dog. Good girl. She wanted this. She's drinking now. All right. To the man who has it, the gift is invaluable. And in proportion as it helps him to be a better man, it is of value to the whole world. But it may, in itself, be so nearly worthless that the publishing of it would be more for harm than good. Thank you, God. Show us the way. Ask anyone who has had to perform the unenviable duty of editor to a magazine. He will corroborate what I say, that the quantity of verse good enough to be its own reward, but without the smallest claim to be uttered to the world, is enormous. Wow. I think of like Eliot's songs that he threw away. I think Mary Lou Lord got one out of the trash. Not Half Right, I think, was the one. And Eliot gave it to her, right? Anyway. Not yet, however, had Donald written a single stanza, a line, or at most two, would now and then come into his head with a buzz, like a wandering honeybee that had mistaken its hive, generally in the shape of a humorous malediction on the cow horn. His name is Hornie, but I don't want to get my videos flagged some places because they don't know what I'm talking about. But that was all, so I'm calling the cow horn. Anyway, in the meantime, Gibbie slept and waked and slept again, night after night, with the loveliest days between, at the cottage on Glashgar. The morning after his arrival, the first thing he was aware of was Janet's face beaming over him, with a look in its eyes more like worship than benevolence. Her husband was gone, and she was about to milk the cow, and was anxious lest while she was away he should disappear as before. But the light that rushed into his eyes was in full response to that which kindled the light in hers, and her misgiving vanished. He could not love her like that and leave her. She gave him his breakfast of porridge and milk and went to her cow. Wow. God, thank you for that. He could not look into her face and love her like that and then leave her. That's beautiful. Wow. God is good. He heals us from our old wounds. From the people that did seem to look that way and then left. That's okay. God never did. And God never does in all the other people that come into our lives that are loving and follow him and, honor God by being loving to us. They're honoring God by loving us. Leia, come on. Good girl. So when she came back, she found everything tidy in the cottage, the floor swept, every dish washed and set aside, and Gibbie was examining an old shoe of Robert's to see whether he could not mend it. Janet, having therefore leisure, proceeded at once with joy to the construction of a garment she had been devising for him. Like she was going to make him clothes, probably the first time anyone ever made him clothes. The design was simple and its execution easy. Taking a blue winsey petticoat of her own, drawing it round his waist and tying it over the chemise, which was his only garment, She found, as she had expected, that its hem reached his feet. She partly divided it up the middle, before and behind, and had but to backstitch 2 short seams, and there was a pair of sailor-like trousers, as tidy, as comfortable. Gibbie was delighted with them. True, he had no pockets, but then he had nothing to put in pockets, and one might come to think of that as an advantage. Gibbie indeed had never had pockets, for the pockets of the garment he had had were always worn out before they reached him. Then Janet thought about a cap, but considering him a moment critically, and seeing how his hair stood out like thatched eaves round his head, she concluded with herself, there must be some men as well as womenfolk, I'm thinking, where hair is given them for a covering, and betook herself instead to the New Testament. Right, because she was going to sew him a cap. Gibbie stood by as she read in silence, gazing with delight, for he thought it must be a book of ballads like Donald's that she was reading, but Janet found his presence, his unresting attitude, and his gaze discomposing. To worship freely, one must be alone or else with fellow worshippers, and reading and worshipping were often so mingled with Janet as to form but one mental consciousness. She looked up, therefore, from her book and said, Can ye read, laddie? Gibbie shook his head. Sit ye down, then, as I'll read to you. Gibbie obeyed more than willingly, expecting to hear some ancient Scots tale of love or chivalry. Instead, it was one of those love-awful, glory-sad chapters in the end of the Gospel of John, over which hangs the darkest cloud of human sorrow, shot through and through with the radiance of light eternal, essential, invincible. Whether it was the uncertain response to Janet's tone merely, or to the truth too loud to be heard, save as a thrill of some chord in his own spirit, having its one end, indeed, twisted around an earthly peg, but the other looped to a tailpiece far in the unknown. I cannot tell. It may have been that the name now and then recurring brought to his mind the last words of poor Sambo, his friend. Anyhow, when Janet looked up, she saw the tears rolling down the child's face. At the same time, from the expression of his countenance, she judged that his understanding had grasped nothing, because she could tell he had like a blank countenance too. She turned, therefore, to the parable of the prodigal son and read it. Even that had not a few words and phrases unknown to Gibbie, but he did not fail to catch the drift of the perfect story. For had not Gibbie himself had a father, of whose bosom he went home every night? Let but love be the interpreter, and what most wretched type will not serve the turn for the carriage of profoundest truths? The prodigal's lowest degradation Gibbie did not understand, but Janet saw the expression of the boy's face alter with every tone of the tale, through all the gamut between the swine's trough and the arms of the father. Remember the prodigal son when he asked his father for the blessing, his inheritance, and he went into the world and he squandered it on parties and harlots, and finally he was, it says that afterwards, his brother says that's what had happened. Some of it is said, but then it's made clear, but the only job he could get was to feed the pigs. And some people say that's like our lower nature, when we just give ourselves over to addictions or to self-righteousness or whatever, when we're just feeding our lower nature. And he said, even the people in my Father's house, the servants, eat better than this. They eat bread. They eat better than pig's food, right? Than this food of addictions, like giving yourself over and just living your life for another drink or another high or whatever. And, whatever else people run to, another ambition, another dollar in your bank account, whatever. He said, I'll go back to my father and offer to be a servant. But when he walked back to his father's house, he says he came to his senses and said that and went. His father saw him because he was looking for him afar off, and he ran to him. And Jesus was saying, this is like the kingdom of heaven, right? God runs to us, and he killed the fatted calf, like Jesus dying for us, right? And he clothed him with a robe. That's like the righteousness we get from Christ. And he put a ring on him. That's like eternity we get with our He said, you are my son. You don't have to be my servant. I make you my son. Of course, when we have that much love, we want to serve. All right, so I won't tell you all of that story, but this is what Gibbie was hearing. And that's one of the understandings that people have given to me. It goes far, far deeper even than I just described. But anyway, so between the swine's trough and the arms of the father, then at last he burst, not into tears. Gibbie was not much acquainted with weeping, but into a laugh of loud triumph. He clapped his hands, and in a shiver of ecstasy stood like a stork upon one leg, as if so much of him was all that could be spared for this lower world, and screwed himself together, right? He just stood up like a stork. This is what he does sometimes. And earlier she said part of it's like a tail. It's kind of like a kite that has a tail. It's like he's up in the skies and he's down on the earth. It's like truly, he might be of a finer substance than even any of us can understand, right? Janet was well satisfied with her experiment. Most Scotch women, and more than most Scotch men, would have rebuked him for laughing, but Janet knew in herself a certain tension of delight, which nothing served to relieve but a wild laughter of holiest gladness. And never in tears of deepest emotion did her heart appeal more directly to its God. It is the heart that is not yet sure of its God that is afraid to laugh in his presence. Thus had Gibbie his first lesson in the only thing worth learning, in that which to be learned at all demands the united energy of heart and soul and strength and mind. And from that day he went on learning it. I cannot tell how or what were the slow stages by which his mind budded and swelled until it burst into the flower of humanity, the knowledge of God. I cannot tell the shape of the door by which the Lord entered into that house and took everlasting possession of it, of Gibbie. He gave his soul to the Lord, right? But anyway, we'll see. I cannot even tell in what shape appeared himself in Gibbie's thoughts, for the Lord can take any shape that is human. I only know it was not an unhuman shape of earthly theology that he bore to Gibbie when he saw him with that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. This is like the island in the sun. Look, with that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. He saw him when you go into this island in the Son of God, right? This inner place. Jesus says when you pray, go into your inner room and shut the door, right? And so anyway, it's so beautiful here. With that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. For happily, Janet never suspected how utter was Gibbie's ignorance. She never dreamed that he did not know what was generally said about Jesus Christ. She thought he must know as well as she the outlines of his story and the purpose of his life and death, as commonly taught, and therefore never attempted explanations, for the sake of which she would probably have found herself driven to use terms and phrases which merely substitute that which is intelligible, because it appeals to what in us is low, and is itself both low and false, for that which, if unintelligible, is so because of its grandeur and truth. That's what I was saying at the very beginning of this. We are a mystery. We're spirit. We're so much more than our physical body, and so these things are mysterious, and words are so limited. Anyway, if unintelligible, it is so because of its grandeur and truth. Leah, go over here, please. Gibbie's ideas of God he got all from the mouth of theology himself, the Word of God, and to the theologian who will not be content with his teaching, the disciple of Jesus must just turn his back, that his face may be to his master, with a capital M, right? Anyway, so teaching him only that which she loved, not that which she had been taught, Janet read to Gibbie of Jesus, talked to him of Jesus, dreamed to him about Jesus, until at length Gibbie did not think to watch and knew nothing of the process by which it came about. This whole soul, his whole soul was full of the man, of his doings, of his words, of his thoughts, of his life. Jesus Christ was in him and was possessed by him. He was possessed by him almost before he knew. He was trying to fashion his life after that of his master. Right. Between the two, it was a sweet teaching, a sweet learning. Under Janet, Gibbie was saved the 1,000 agonies that befall the conscientious disciple from the forcing upon him, as the thoughts and will of the eternal Father of our spirits, of the ill-expressed, worse-understood experiences, the crude conjectures, like we find sometimes in churches, right? The vulgar imaginations of would-be teachers of the multitude, containing truth enough to save those of sufficiently low development. To receive such teaching without disgust, it contains falsehood enough, but for the Spirit of God to ruin all nobler, all childlike natures, right? That's why it's so hard for me in any of my videos to express the truths of God and I don't want to just say words in doctrine, That's why I enter into the song and we become like a child together, but anyway. So it contains falsehood enough, but for the Spirit of God to ruin all nobler, all childlike natures utterly, and many such it has gone far to ruin, driving them even to a madness in which they have died. Jesus alone knows the Father and can reveal him. Janet studied Jesus. Janet studied only Jesus, and as a man knows his friend, so she, only infinitely better, knew her more than friend, her Lord and her God. Do I speak of a poor Scotch peasant woman too largely for the reader whose test of truth is the notion of probability he draws from his own experience? Let me put one question to make the real probability clearer. Should it be any wonder if Christ be indeed the natural Lord of every man, woman, and child, that a simple, capable nature, laying itself entirely open to him and his influences, should understand him? How should he be the Lord of that nature if such a thing were not possible, or were not at all, or were at all improbable? Nay, if such a thing did not necessarily follow, among women was it not always to peasant women that heavenly messages came? See Revelation culminant in Elizabeth and Mary and the mothers of John the Baptist and Jesus. Think how much fitter that it should be so, that they to whom the word of God comes should be women, bred in the dignity of a natural life and familiarity with the large ways of the earth, women of simple and few wants, without distraction and with time for reflection, compelled to reflection, indeed, from the enduring presence of an unsullied consciousness. For wherever there is a humble, thoughtful nature, into that nature the divine consciousness, that is, the Spirit of God, presses as into its own place. Holy women are to be found everywhere, but the prophetess is not so likely to be found in the city as in the hill country. Even Mary and Martha, Mary was outside of the city. They were like 5 miles, I think, from Bethlehem or Jerusalem, where Lazarus was raised, and she sat at the feet of Jesus, and she also poured out a year's worth of wages, worth of this perfume oil that she had on his feet, and wiped it with her hair to prepare him for his burial, and anyway, she had this knowing that it was for him. Like, imagine if people make $100,000 in a year or $50,000 in a year, that you pour out $50,000 perfume or oil on our Lord's feet and wipe it with your hair. Anyway. Whatever Janet then might perhaps, I do not know, have imagined it her duty to say to Gibbie, had she surmised his ignorance, having long ceased to trouble her own head, She had now no inclination to trouble Gibbie's heart with what men call the plan of salvation. Aww. It was enough to her to find that he followed her master. Being in the light, she understood the light, and had no need of system, either true or false, to explain it to her. She lived by the word proceeding out of the mouth of God. When life begins to speculate upon itself, I suspect it has begun to die, and seldom has there been a fitter soul, one clearer from evil, from folly, from human device, a purer cistern for such water of life as rose in the heart of Janet Grant, to pour itself into, then, the soul of Sir Gibbie. Look at how God brought Sir Gibbie to the best place where he could learn in the truest way. Thank you, God. Thank you for us, too. But I must not call any true soul a cistern. Wherever the water of life is received, it sinks and softens and hollows until it reaches far down the springs of life. So it's not like a well. It's like a, it goes into this ground, right? We are the ground. Oh, there's a father and child up there, a mother and child. But I don't put other people in my videos, but let's get the sun again. Unless I get permission or something, right? Oops. Hollows until it reaches far down the springs of life. Therefore also that comes straight from the eternal hills, and thenceforth there is in that soul a well of water springing up into everlasting life. Right? That's there's a guy named Kevin Zadai that died and went to heaven and talked to Jesus for 45 minutes. It said he saw that the river of life in heaven, and just like knew if you drank of it, you'd be healed of anything, right? And Jesus says, you drink of me, I am the living water. If you drink of me, this living water will become alive in you. He says it at the well. I have about 3 minutes left, and I'll just start this. This is called The Slate, chapter 24. From that very next day then after, he was received into the cottage of Glashgar. Gibbie, as a matter of course, took upon him the work his hand could find to do, and Janet averred to her husband that never had any of her daughters been more useful to her. At the same time, however, she insisted that Robert should take the boy out with him. She would not have him do women's work, especially work for which she was herself perfectly able. She had to stay fit and able to, right? Wow. She had not come to her years, she said, to learn idle sets, and the boy would save Robert many a weary step among the hills. He cannot speak to the dog, objected Robert, giving utterance to the first difficulty that suggested itself. The dog cannot speak himself, returned Janet, and wonder as he can understand what he knows, but he may come full nigher and even speechless like himself. Anyway, we'll see. Ye give the creature the chance, and I am swearing that he'll make himself plain to the dog. Ye just try him. Tell him to tell the dog something, and say, and see what'll come of it. All right? And so Robert made the experiment, and it proved satisfactory. As soon as he had received Robert's order, Gibbie claimed Oscar's attention. The dog looked up on his face and noted every glance and gesture, and partly from sympathetic instinct, that gift lying so near the very essence of life, partly from observation of the state of affairs in respect to the sheep, divined with certainty what the duty required of him was, and was off like a shot. All right, so he could instruct the dog. Oh. The twa dumb creatures understand one another better than I understand either of them, said Robert to his wife when they came home. He's just saying dumb, like deaf and dumb, not dumb. He's not calling him dumb. He's saying he's mute. He cannot speak, like the dog cannot speak, but the dog can bark, and Gibbie can laugh, right? And now, indeed, it was a blessed time for Gibbie. It had been pleasant down in the valley with the cattle and Donald, and foul weather sometimes, but now it was the full glow of summer. The sweet, keen air of the mountain bathed him as he ran, entered into him, filled him with life, like the new wine of the kingdom of God, and the whole world rose in its glory round him. Surely it is not the It is not the outspread sea, however, the sight of its storms and its laboring ships may enhance the sense of safety to the onlooker, but the outspread land of peace and plenty, with its nestling houses, its well-stocked yards, its cattle feeding in the meadows, and its men and horses at labor in the fields, that gives the deepest delight to the heart of the poet. Even though we could, oh look, the sea is a bit, you can see the island out away from it. I won't say what island it is. I'm in Southern California, but there's an island out behind the sea over there. All right, it's been an hour. As much as I'd love to continue. Let's see. Gibbie was one of the meek and inherited the earth. That's in Matthew 5. I was reading this morning. Throned on the mountain, he beheld the multiform goings-on of life, and in love possessed the whole. He was of the poet kind also, and now and then he was a shepherd, saw everything with shepherd eyes. All right, come here, Leia. Oh, come here. Come here. Aw, I have a body thing, so it's not grabbing her throat. Aw. All right, I'm going to take care of Leia. Lots of love to you guys. Share this with like-minded or people that will benefit. Much love.